There is a forbidden habit Japan never markets. It is not budgeting. It is not saving harder. It is a state of inner composure that commands money to arrange itself through a bridge of incidents. Neville Goddard revealed this with disarming simplicity when he explained that wealth follows the assumption of sufficiency, not effort. He did not say effort is wrong, nor did he glorify laziness. Instead, he pointed to a deeper cause operating beneath visible action. The world rearranges itself around what you quietly assume to be true about yourself. When sufficiency is assumed, behavior becomes calm, decisions become clean, and opportunities align without friction. When lack is assumed, even intelligent action leaks energy, because it is driven by fear rather than expectancy. Money, like all manifestations, is obedient to consciousness, not force. Consider Neville's analogy of the planted seed. When a seed is placed into the soil, nothing appears to happen for a time. The untrained mind becomes impatient and starts digging, checking, interfering, or doubting the process. Yet the seed does not require observation. It requires faith in the law that governs growth. It expands in silence, in darkness, untouched by anxiety. In the same way, wealth grows when it is allowed to mature beneath the surface of awareness, free from constant monitoring. Watching it too closely is not attentiveness. It is interference born from disbelief. When we speak of Japanese habits in this context, we are not pointing to cultural tricks, financial systems, or external routines that can be copied mechanically. What we are pointing to are states of being, internal postures toward life that value order, patience, neutrality, and respect for invisible process. These habits are not performed for results. They are lived as identity. They do not shout their intentions. They do not rush outcomes. They reflect an internal environment where life is trusted to function intelligently. This is why their results appear quiet, steady, and cumulative, rather than explosive and chaotic. Modern science now echoes what mystics understood intuitively. Dr. Joe Dispenza has shown that calm, regulated inner states create stable external results. When the nervous system is coherent, the body signals safety to the environment, and the environment responds accordingly. Stress broadcasts urgency and survival, calm broadcasts expectation and order. Money, opportunities, and timing respond more easily to coherence than to emotional turbulence. What feels peaceful inside becomes predictable outside. This is not philosophy. It is cause and effect operating at a subtle level. The thesis of this teaching is simple but uncompromising. When life feels orderly inside, money must organize itself outside. Disorder within produces fragmentation without. Calm within produces coordination without. This is why wealth that grows silently tends to last, while wealth pursued noisily often dissolves as quickly as it arrives. Throughout this exploration, you are not being asked to do more, strive harder, or think positively through clenched teeth. You are being invited to notice the quality of your inner life and to recognize that money is not something you convince the world to give you, but something that flows naturally toward the state you occupy. There is a subtle pattern that reveals itself when you stop listening to what people say about money and start watching how it actually behaves in their lives. Those who are constantly announcing their plans, advertising their struggle, and emphasizing how hard they are trying often seem trapped in cycles of near success followed by loss. Their effort is visible, their urgency is loud, yet the results remain unstable. Meanwhile, others move almost invisibly, speaking little about their financial intentions, appearing unhurried and internally settled, and somehow their resources grow with far less friction. This contrast is not about intelligence or morality. It is about signal. What you broadcast internally determines what can remain with you externally. Noise, at a psychological level, is not volume, but urgency. It is the inner pressure that says something must happen now or else something is wrong. This pressure leaks through tone, behavior, timing, and decision-making, even when words sound confident. Urgency signals lack, because it is rooted in the assumption that what is desired is absent and unstable. Money, responding to assumption rather than desire, cannot settle where it is treated as scarce or fleeting. It arrives briefly, tests the environment, and leaves when it detects tension. Quiet people are not passive, they are composed. Their calm is not indifference but expectancy without strain. Imagine someone shaking a vending machine aggressively because the item has not dropped fast enough. The shaking is fueled by impatience, but it often jams the mechanism further. Waiting, though less dramatic, aligns with how the machine actually works. Money operates in a similar way. When you try to force outcomes through emotional pressure, overthinking, or compulsive action, you disrupt the very channels through which things would have arrived naturally. Silence in this sense is not inactivity. It is alignment with process. It allows the mechanism to complete its cycle without interference. This is why loud effort so often leaks money. It is driven by an internal posture that does not expect continuity. Spending becomes reactive, decisions become rushed, and opportunities are taken prematurely out of fear they might disappear. Quiet accumulation, by contrast, emerges from an internal posture of sufficiency. When sufficiency is assumed, there is no need to prove, announce, or rush. Actions still occur, but they arise from clarity rather than panic. Timing improves because the individual is not trying to outrun an imagined threat. Silent wealth begins with an internal posture, long before it appears as numbers, assets, or opportunities. It begins when urgency is replaced with trust, when explanation is replaced with embodiment, and when effort is guided by calm expectancy instead of fear of absence. In that internal stillness, money finds a stable place to remain, not because it is chased less, but because it is no longer being pushed away by noise. There is a quiet paradox at the center of manifestation that few people are willing to face. The more desperately something is wanted, the more unstable it becomes in one's experience. Wanting, when examined closely, is not desire but tension. It is the inner confession that something essential is missing, and that confession becomes the operating assumption. Calm possession, on the other hand, carries no urgency because it assumes continuity. Money responds more faithfully to the feeling of already having enough than to emotional hunger disguised as ambition. Emotional neutrality is often misunderstood as indifference or suppression, but it is neither. It is a state of inner balance, where outcomes are allowed to move without being emotionally gripped. When money is tied to emotional survival, every fluctuation feels personal, and this volatility disrupts consistency. Neutrality creates internal order because it removes the spikes of fear and excitement that distort perception. From this balanced state, decisions are made with clarity rather than reactivity, and money is allowed to circulate instead of being clutched or chased. The image of holding sand in your hand explains this principle perfectly. When the fist clenches tightly, sand escapes through the cracks, no matter how strong the grip. When the hand remains open and relaxed, the sand rests there naturally. Non-attachment does not mean letting go of intention. It means releasing emotional contraction around the outcome. Money behaves like the sand. It resists pressure, but responds to openness. The calmer the grip, the more stable the hold. This neutrality is not learned through discipline alone. It emerges from a shift in identity. When someone quietly assumes that resources are part of their natural environment, emotional intensity loses its purpose. There is no need to react dramatically to gains or losses because neither threatens the core assumption of sufficiency. From this state, money stops being an emotional event and becomes a practical flow, adjusting itself without creating inner disturbance. Internal order is born when emotional neutrality becomes the default response. In that order, there is less mental noise, fewer impulsive decisions, and more intuitive timing. Opportunities are recognized without excitement, and risks are avoided without fear. This inner stability is what allows wealth to grow quietly because it is no longer being disrupted by emotional extremes. Money, sensing coherence, remains where it can move freely without being squeezed or idolized. There comes a point in every sincere examination of money where one must confront the exhaustion created by constant forcing. Force appears productive on the surface because it creates motion, but motion is not the same as alignment. Many people confuse effort with effectiveness, believing that pushing harder will eventually yield results, yet their experience shows repeated resistance, delays, and unnecessary obstacles. Respecting flow does not mean abandoning action. It means understanding that action taken against the current multiplies fatigue while action taken with the current multiplies results. Alignment replaces effort when the inner state shifts from proving to allowing. In this state, action feels appropriate rather than urgent, and timing becomes intuitive rather than calculated. Money responds differently to aligned action because it is not being pursued as a solution to inner tension. When force stops, the nervous system relaxes, perception sharpens, and opportunities that were previously invisible begin to register. This is not because the world suddenly changes, but because awareness is no longer distorted by pressure. The analogy of rowing with the current, rather than fighting upstream, reveals why force is so costly. When rowing against the current, even strong strokes produce minimal progress, and exhaustion sets in quickly. When the direction aligns with the flow, the same movement carries you farther with less strain. Money follows similar laws. When actions are taken from a state of inner resistance, they require constant reinforcement. When actions arise from alignment, they carry momentum of their own. Timing improves naturally when force is removed. Instead of acting too early out of fear or too late out of hesitation, decisions arise from a sense of readiness. This readiness is not intellectual, it is felt. It comes from being internally settled enough to sense when movement is appropriate. In this state, money arrives through channels that feel almost obvious in hindsight, though they were inaccessible during periods of strain. Respecting flow creates a relationship with money that is cooperative rather than combative. There is less need to control every detail because trust in process replaces micromanagement. This trust does not weaken results, it stabilizes them. When force stops, life stops pushing back, and timing begins to arrange itself with a precision that cannot be achieved through effort alone. If quiet clarity is reshaping how you see money, subscribe and stay aligned with this way of thinking. Beneath every visible pattern of behavior lies an invisible assumption about who one is allowed to be. Actions do not arise in isolation. They emerge naturally from identity. When identity is unstable or conflicted, behavior becomes inconsistent, even when intentions are sincere. In matters of money, this creates a cycle where effort increases but results remain uneven. Identity, once assumed, organizes action without force, because behavior follows what feels natural to the role being occupied. The concept of identity operating before action explains why willpower so often fails. Willpower attempts to override identity temporarily, but identity always reasserts itself. When someone internally sees themselves as struggling, even disciplined action carries the tone of compensation. When someone quietly assumes the role of a person for whom resources are normal, preparation happens automatically. Like a host preparing a table because guests are expected, there is no emotional strain involved. The preparation is not hopeful, it is appropriate. This internal installation of identity happens beneath conscious thought. It is not announced, affirmed loudly, or defended. It is felt as a quiet certainty that shapes perception. From this place, money-related decisions feel obvious rather than debated. Saving, investing, declining, or accepting opportunities no longer require dramatic internal dialogue because they are consistent with the assumed role. Identity simplifies complexity by reducing inner conflict. When identity is aligned, action becomes efficient. There is less overthinking and fewer compensatory behaviors. Effort is not eliminated, but it is streamlined because it serves a clear internal image rather than an anxious desire. Money responds to this coherence by staying where it fits. It is not impressed by ambition alone, but it is stabilized by congruence between self-concept and behavior. Installing identity beneath conscious thought is what allows wealth to grow without constant management. The individual is no longer trying to become someone through money. Money is simply reflecting who they already assume themselves to be. In this way, identity becomes the silent architect of financial order, shaping outcomes long before actions are noticed or results are counted. Silence has long been mistaken for emptiness, when in truth, it is structure. It is the invisible boundary that allows energy, intention, and assumption to remain undisturbed long enough to mature. In the realm of money, silence is not about secrecy or withdrawal, it is about internal completion. When something is fully accepted within, there is no impulse to broadcast it outward. The urge to speak excessively about plans, goals, or financial movements often arises from an unfinished inner state, a subtle need for confirmation that the assumption is real. Silence indicates that confirmation has already occurred internally. There is a psychological weight to explanation that most people do not recognize. Every time an intention is verbalized prematurely, it is exposed to interpretation, reaction, and comparison. Even supportive responses can fragment the original assumption by introducing alternative timelines, doubts, or conditions. Silence protects coherence. When the inner picture is allowed to remain intact, it strengthens, not through repetition but through consistency. This is why individuals who accumulate wealth quietly often appear unremarkable until results become undeniable. Their silence is not strategic, it is natural to their state. Authority, in its pure form, is calm. It does not argue for its validity, nor does it seek acknowledgement. Less explanation equals more authority, because authority assumes understanding without requiring agreement. In financial life, this translates into fewer justifications, fewer emotional conversations, and fewer attempts to convince others of one's direction. Money responds well to this kind of inner authority because it is stable. It does not fluctuate based on mood or approval. When explanation decreases, energy is conserved, and that conserved energy reinforces assumption. The analogy of a sealed envelope versus an open ledger illustrates this principle with precision. A sealed envelope contains its message fully, untouched by speculation. An open ledger, while transparent, invites constant review, adjustment, and commentary. When financial intentions are treated like an open ledger, they are repeatedly revised under emotional pressure. Silence seals the envelope. It allows the intention to remain whole until its contents are ready to be revealed through natural outcome rather than verbal declaration. Silence also interrupts a subtle form of self-sabotage, the need to perform one's progress. Performance creates timing distortions. When progress must be seen, there is pressure to produce visible results before the internal foundation is ready. This leads to premature action, overextension, or unnecessary risk. Silence removes the audience, and without an audience there is no rush. Timing stabilizes because movement is no longer driven by appearance, but by alignment. Assumption stabilizes in silence because contradiction is minimized. Words have weight, and when spoken without inner certainty, they create tension between expression and belief. By saying less, one reduces the opportunities for internal disagreement. The inner state becomes consistent because it is not constantly being tested through speech. Money, responding to consistency, settles into patterns that are repeatable and sustainable rather than erratic and reactive. There is also a relational dimension to silence that influences wealth. When boundaries are clear and communication is measured, others respond with greater respect. Fewer explanations invite fewer demands. In this way, silence preserves not only internal energy, but external autonomy. Financial decisions remain sovereign, untouched by obligation or guilt. This sovereignty allows money to be directed intentionally rather than reactively, reinforcing long-term stability. In silence, attention returns inward, where assumption quietly strengthens. This inward focus does not isolate. It integrates. Thoughts align, emotions settle, and behavior becomes congruent without effort. From this integration, actions arise that feel inevitable rather than forced. Results follow not because they are chased, but because nothing within is pushing them away. Silence becomes the space where wealth is no longer managed anxiously, but allowed to multiply as a natural extension of a settled inner state. Order is often mistaken for aesthetics or discipline, but at its deepest level, it is coherence made visible. The way one arranges their day is never separate from the way life arranges itself in response. Money, like all forms of flow, moves more easily through environments that are clear, predictable, and internally aligned. Disorder is not morally wrong, but it is informational. It communicates fragmentation, distraction, and unresolved tension. Financial instability rarely appears on its own. It usually mirrors a subtle lack of internal structure that has gone unnoticed. Daily order is not about perfection or rigid schedules. It is about rhythm. When the day has a natural sequence, the nervous system relaxes because it knows what comes next. This relaxation sharpens perception and reduces impulsive behavior. In a disordered day, attention is constantly pulled from one unfinished thing to another, creating mental noise. That noise does not stay contained. It spills into financial decisions, producing forgetfulness, procrastination, missed opportunities, and reactive spending. Order quiets the mind, and a quiet mind makes cleaner choices. The analogy of clearing a desk so important documents can appear captures this relationship clearly. When a desk is cluttered, Valuable papers may already be present, but they are buried beneath irrelevant items. Clearing the surface does not create new documents, it reveals what was already there. In the same way, daily order does not manufacture opportunities, it uncovers them. When the inner and outer environment is organized, signals that were previously ignored become visible. Invitations, ideas, and timing emerge naturally because attention is no longer fragmented. Financial order responds to consistency more than intensity. Small, repeated signals of coherence tell life that stability is welcome. This can show up as returning items to their place, completing tasks fully, or maintaining simple routines without drama. These actions are not symbolic, they are instructive. They teach the subconscious that follow-through is normal and that loose ends are resolved. Money, responding to this instruction, begins to behave similarly. Payments arrive on time, expenses become predictable, and resources circulate without constant intervention. There is also a temporal aspect to order that affects wealth. When days are chaotic, time feels compressed and urgency dominates. This urgency pressures decisions and shortens perspective. When days are orderly, time feels spacious. This spaciousness allows for long-term thinking and patience, both of which are essential for stable financial growth. Order stretches time psychologically, and with that stretch comes better judgment and improved timing. Daily order also reduces resistance. Resistance often appears as avoidance, delay, or overwhelm, and it thrives in disorganization. When the environment is clear, resistance has less room to hide. Tasks are approached one at a time, and completion becomes satisfying rather than exhausting. This sense of completion reinforces self-trust. Self-trust, in turn, stabilizes financial behavior. Money is managed calmly because there is confidence in one's ability to handle what arrives. Order invites opportunity quietly because it does not demand attention. It creates space rather than noise. In that space, life places what fits. Financial improvements that come through order often feel understated, almost unremarkable, yet they accumulate steadily. There is no dramatic turning point, only a gradual increase in ease. Bills feel lighter, planning feels simpler, and decisions feel less charged. When daily life reflects internal coherence, money recognizes the environment as compatible. It moves in not as a guest that must be entertained anxiously, but as a resident that belongs there. In this way, daily order becomes financial order, not through effort or control, but through alignment that is lived quietly, one ordinary moment at a time. There is a stage in every process of growth where nothing appears to be happening, and it is precisely at this stage that trust becomes most valuable. The visible world is always delayed feedback. What appears as stagnation is often consolidation occurring beneath the surface, where structures are being formed that cannot yet be seen. Money, like growth in nature, does not announce its preparation. It organizes itself quietly, assembling conditions long before results become visible. Without trust in invisible progress, this stage is misinterpreted as failure, and interference begins. Faith in unseen movement is not blind optimism, it is familiarity with how life actually works. Every stable outcome passes through a period of invisibility. Roots form before branches, foundations settle before structures rise. When this phase is respected, growth continues uninterrupted. When it is doubted, the process is disrupted by impatience. Financial anxiety often arises not from lack, but from misreading timing. The assumption that nothing is happening simply because nothing is visible creates unnecessary tension that interferes with natural unfolding. The analogy of trusting roots to grow underground before the tree appears reveals why restraint is essential. Digging up the soil to check progress does not accelerate growth, it damages it. In financial terms, this digging shows up as constant checking, second-guessing, abrupt changes in direction, or abandoning a path too early. These actions are driven by discomfort with uncertainty rather than by evidence of misalignment. Trust allows the process to remain intact long enough for momentum to develop. Invisible progress requires a particular inner posture, patience without passivity. This posture does not deny movement, it assumes it. The individual no longer needs reassurance because the assumption of continuity has been installed. From this state, attention shifts away from monitoring and toward living. Daily life continues without emotional fixation on outcomes. Ironically, it is often at this point that visible changes begin to occur, precisely because the pressure that blocked them has dissolved. This trust activates what Neville described as the bridge of incidents. Events begin to line up in sequences that feel natural rather than forced. Conversations occur at the right time, information appears unexpectedly, and opportunities arise without effort. None of these incidents announce themselves as part of a grand plan, yet together they form a clear path. The bridge is invisible while it is forming, but unmistakable once crossed. Trust is what allows each step to be taken without resistance. Doubt interrupts the bridge not because it is morally wrong, but because it fragments attention. When attention is divided between faith and fear, actions lose coherence. Trust unifies attention. It allows the individual to move forward without needing to understand the entire sequence. Money responds to this unity because it thrives in environments where consistency is present. Invisible progress becomes visible only after trust has stabilized the internal environment. There is also an emotional economy to trust. When one no longer spends energy worrying about unseen stages, that energy becomes available for perception and intuition. This heightened sensitivity allows for subtle adjustments that keep the process aligned without force. Decisions become lighter, timing becomes clearer, and effort becomes efficient. The progress was always occurring, but trust allows it to complete its cycle without interruption. Ultimately, trust in invisible progress is what separates those who experience temporary gains from those who experience lasting stability. Temporary gains often come from forcing visibility too soon, while stability emerges from allowing depth to develop first. Money that grows this way feels earned without strain and secure without vigilance. It arrives quietly, stays comfortably, and expands naturally because it was given the time and space required to take root before it was ever asked to be seen. There is an intelligence at work beneath the surface of life that rarely draws attention to itself. Neville referred to this as the bridge of incidents because it quietly links an inner assumption to its external expression without effort or struggle. When money grows without stress, it is almost always moving along this bridge. Events do not arrive with drama or urgency. They unfold naturally, often appearing ordinary while they are happening. Only later does their order become clear. The bridge operates through silence and sequence. Conversations occur at the right time. Delays reveal their purpose and opportunities appear without pressure. None of these incidents announce themselves as important, yet each one fits precisely into place. Money moves through this process in the same way. It does not arrive as a sudden rescue, but as a steady adjustment in circumstances that feels appropriate rather than surprising. This is why stress is absent. Nothing feels forced. Neville emphasized that once an assumption of sufficiency is accepted, the bridge organizes itself automatically. There is no need to manage the process emotionally or intellectually. Consciousness has already selected the outcome, and life arranges the steps. Financial progress that follows this pattern feels almost impersonal. Income increases, expenses shift, and stability improves without constant monitoring. The absence of urgency is not neglect, it is trust in sequence. Stress interferes with the bridge because it fragments attention and disrupts timing. When outcomes are watched too closely, actions become reactive, and the natural order of events is disturbed. The bridge depends on coherence. When coherence is present, each incident leads seamlessly to the next. When it is absent, effort must replace alignment. True wealth arrives without announcement, because it feels expected. There is no shock, only recognition. Money that comes through the bridge integrates smoothly into life, bringing ease rather than anxiety. In this way, the bridge of incidents reveals that money does not need to be chased. It moves quietly, step by step, responding faithfully to an inner state that has already accepted its arrival. Neville's truth remains simple and uncompromising. Money grows where sufficiency is assumed, not where effort is strained or outcomes are chased, but where inner life is calm and settled. These habits are not techniques to perform, but states of consciousness that naturally express themselves through behavior. When the inner state is regulated, the outer world reflects order without resistance. Neville's mirror reminds us that life responds. It does not initiate. Calm within produces coherence without. In that stillness, identity stabilizes, assumption holds, and money arrives as confirmation rather than surprise. As Neville said, "Be still and know that I am. Subscribe to remain in this state, where calm assumptions let wealth grow quietly.